Unlocking the Golden Cage. This is a podcast that, yes, I'm just starting this. This is a podcast that unlocks the themes of a new award winning musical written by me and explores the stories and people who inspired it. In this episode, we will be speaking with Cindy Lou Barlow, author of the book Playing You, to gain her unique perspective on the themes of the show as they show up in her work. So join us as we unlock the secrets of the Golden Cage and discover the stories that lie within ourselves. Before we begin today, I want to say that we're in the final days of our premier fundraiser for the Golden Cage. So make sure that you go to goldencagemusical.com to donate to the show and get the great thank you gifts. And you can find that link also in the post that comes along with this podcast if you're watching us live. Welcome, Cindy. Before we start, I want to read something about your book. So, author and coach Mia Moran described your book as an amazing tool for anyone ready to figure out who they really are and step into the only role that we were born to play, ourselves. This is particularly interesting in terms of the characters of the Golden Cage because those two characters, Althea and Boris, are actually metaphors for two fragmented selves of me who are finally reconnected at the end of the story. So I see your work as a kind of mirror image to the Golden Cage in that you took your life as an actor and created a book and workshops and work that allows anyone to use the skills and tools of being an actor. And or actually, you took the tools of theatrical character building to use in their own lives. And I took what I experienced in my life and created theater out of it. So the Golden Cage is an allegory in which two fragmented parts of a person meet and ultimately liberate each other. And your work is about how to liberate yourself by using acting. So anyway, talk to me about this. You were one of the first people to ever see the Golden Cage.
I know. I feel so privileged. Well, first of all, I just have to say thank you, number one, for having me here with you today. I'm so psyched to have this opportunity to talk with you. And secondly, congratulations for all the awards. I saw it, and then when I got to see it again, and I saw that you got all these awards, I was just excited, and congratulations on all that, especially the award for the music, which is so original and beautiful, and also the actors that you got are just brilliant. You really, they really nailed it, I thought. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's funny because when you just said that just now, and I was thinking, oh, I'm talking to the author of Playing You, and I was like, whoa, those two people played me.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's very right. Can you hear any of the?
I just heard a little bit of the honking, but this is live.
Open, so okay.
That's okay. It's spring. It's summer. So
Yeah.
so the Golden Cage is a musical, but it's really an allegory for sort of a fragmented part of ourselves. It was a question I had about whether my life is going to be about freedom or about security. And then that question became two characters that then play out in this musical. And I know that your work is really also about us being able to connect ourselves. And there's a lot of themes in the Golden Cage, and I'm just wondering if you would like to sort of talk through them or some of them, or if there's some in specific that you looked at and were like, yeah, this is kind of what I'd like to talk about.
Well, yeah. So like, first of all, to take my book Playing You and the Golden Cage and put them next to each other, I think one of the first things is that, one of the things I talk about in my book is that, you don't have that many years to play you, and you're the only one that can play you. Like, you're it. Like, this is the whole show for you. And, as an actor, you're playing a lot of different characters, and a lot of actors will not even know how to play themselves, But this whole idea of who are you? What parts am I? What roles am I playing? What roles do I not want to play, but I keep playing over and over again? Or what roles would I like to play, but I never get cast in them, or I never cast myself in them? So what I saw in your production was that, like you said, there's two parts of yourself, and there's these two roles, and one that's in this beautiful golden cage, and she doesn't realize that there's anything else. and doesn't understand, you know, well, actually doesn't realize it, number one, and then to get out of it and to like break through, um, seems absolutely impossible. And, um, as an artist, and, like even when I was writing my book, there were just times where it took me so long to write it. And part of it was because, well, what are people going to think of me? Or just the fear of, well, obviously criticism, but just like, well, who do I think I am? Like, do I really even know anything? And all of those things. So breaking out of that cage. And actually, I believe, as I remember right, she got tricked out of breaking out of the cage.
Well, yes, she does get tricked. She does get tricked, but I have it that there's a reason that she allows herself to finally get tricked. But you know what? I love how you're saying, who do I think I am? Because one of the things that's really interesting about Althea, and I wish I could just like bring a picture of her up. I might be able to bring a video up in a second. I have a really short video that's like a promo, but it'll show a little bit about her. I'll do that in just a second. She's always trying on these different costumes. She has this, hat. He has this Viking hat. If it's a moment for drama and aggression, she'll put on a Viking hat and take a sword. If it's a moment for reflection, she'll put on this wig that's like Mozart. She just does all these things, and what's interesting is that in fact these characters switch. And then the other character ends up putting on her costume and actually taking on her persona. So they switch. And I think it's just so interesting. Who do I think I am? What do I think I can do as this person or as that person? And so I'm really interested.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like I'll show these characters in a minute, but are there any things we can do in our lives to actually take costumes or to take something that would make us feel more like what we're trying to be?
Well, I think first of all, we're all here and we're all unique, and our primary relationship is as ourselves, and excuse me, we're here to play ourselves, and no one else is going to play us, like we got cast, this is our role. And so the number one, I think, and this is one of the things we talk about, is there were 18 magic questions in my book. And the first one is, who am I? Why am I here? What do I want? Like just, those regular, those questions. And those are questions that you ask as a child. It's like, Mom, like, why am I here? Like, I remember asking that. And it's just like that first existential question that you ask. So remind me what the question you just asked.
Well, actually, it doesn't matter, because as you're speaking, I was realizing that's so interesting, because one of the first thing that happened when this character comes out is she asks those questions. I mean, as you were speaking, I was thinking the lines that she says, I can't remember what it was. Like, here I am in a golden cage, what am I doing here? What is here?
Yeah, why am I here?
Who am I? I used to dream that I could fly. Now I only dream. I dream of dreaming. That's all I do. So in fact, that's one of the first things that you see this character do, is to look at those same things that we look at. How did I get stuck here?
Yeah.
What am I stuck in?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I've really seen for myself is, the most dangerous place to be is in my head,
Right.
And that's the place that I get stuck the most. I have people say, well, just do it. Why don't you just make that call? Or why don't you just go on that audition? It's just like, no, like, right. So, yeah.
Well, I'd love to talk about that, because there's a moment in the play when exactly that happens, where not only can this character not get out, even though everybody else can see, yeah, you can get out. There's nothing there. There's nothing in your way. Exactly. Quite literally. And yet she literally can't, because once you're in that cage, it changes constitution. It becomes granite and iron, whereas on the outside, it is irresistible and beautiful. And there's this one moment when she comes right to the moment of I mean, what ends up happening is the other character does trick her. He tricks her by coming up with this absurd set of things to do to kind of distract her from the fact that he's going to say, and yes, you just did it, and now you can get out. Boom. But even at that moment when the last thing she has to do, and I'm just curious, I have certainly experienced this. The last thing I have to do, she's got the trumpet to her lips. She cannot blow. We cannot do the one thing that will literally, in her case, bring the walls down, at least in her mind. And yet she still does eventually, it resolves. But one thing that's fascinating to me as I look at the show is how many moments in my life are, the analogy is there in that show, that it's appearing anyway. So
yeah. Well, what you're reminding me of, so some of the questions I have is like, what do you want? Why do you want it? And then why don't you want it? Which is a question we always say, well, what is your why? Why do you want this? And that should just be enough because, well, I just want to be free. I want to fly, right? But the other question is, why don't I want it? Because if I wanted it, if I really wanted it 100%, I would just get it. And there's always a resistance, something underneath, like, why don't I want it? Well, in her case, it's like just all the fears, like, well, what if I'm not good? What if I screw up, like whatever those things are, or I look stupid, or whatever those things are, in ourselves. So we walk around as if I know what I want. This is what I want. I'm going to go after it. And then it starts to come towards us. And then we're like, I can't do it. And we get stuck. And then we just go back to our cage. But I also have a question of like, so it's Althea and
Boris.
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 Oh, Boris.
So, yeah.
Why did Boris want to go into the cage? What was?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that is really, really interesting. And when I was first writing the show, there were 4 questions that I couldn't answer. And every time I would share the show, people would be like, but wait a second, why this, why this, and why this, and why this? And one of the questions was, why does someone who can fly want a cage?
Right.
Another question was, why does he push her off that cliff?
Yeah.
That's mean. Why does he do that? And then the third question is, how come she can suddenly fly? How does that happen? And then the final question is, what does unlock the cage? And I didn't know the answers to these for so long.
Yeah.
And it literally took me to live through them in order to be able to actually know the answers to the questions. So let me try to answer your question.
Yeah, let's hear those answers.
I forgot your question.
So the question was just like,
cage?
Why does Boris want to get?
Well, here's what he sings. Let's see if I don't know if you'll be able to hear this.
All right.
He sings, "My father sang the tales to me every night when I was small, of those who left to find the cage, returned in shame or not at all. And snug inside my little nest, my mind inflamed with cage and quest, I swore I'd be the one to prove the myth was true, that I would find the golden cage. I always dreamt about it as a child, the golden cage, the place where everything you've ever dreamt would happen, whoa, happens for you, the golden cage." So thank you. It's a completely different harmony than you'll hear.
I know.
I was like, that doesn't sound like it, but I can't play what's in the show. But so the point is, why is he looking for a golden cage? Like many of us, there's a generational story, something that came down to us. So in my case, why did I become an artist? Why did I choose a life? Everybody knows you're not going to, it's going to be a problem. Why did I choose that? And I chose it in part because, my mother was an incredible artist, and I got the sense that this was an amazing thing. I got that it was difficult to be an artist, so part of me was like, I will make it as an artist, and I also heard that my grandmother's father, and I later found out, no, it was her mother, forbid her to be an artist. And so there was both that forbidden part of it,
Right.
or he forbid her to be, or she was forbidden to be a performer. So there was that hidden forbidden part of it, and there was also that desire of something is really beautiful and wonderful. So Boris, the bird person, heard about this place of security,
Right.
the place of safety, the place of belonging. And it was not presented, the cage was not presented to him as a place, as a prison. And so he was looking for it his whole life. And how many of us experience that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, you're saying something really interesting, and that is that what we try and make our paradise, we often make into a prison.
Okay, how?
Well, the golden cage, okay?
All right.
No, I just mean like what we want is comfort.
Right.
So it's just like addiction, I really like Pema Chodron's, I don't know if you know Pema Chodron, she's a Buddhist, but I like her definition of addiction. She says addiction is something that you think will make you feel better, but it ends up making you feel worse in the end. So we find things to comfort us, or that we think they're comforting, but in the end, they become our prisons. We can't get out of them.
And the question is, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And many people have drawn many people have drawn the connection between this show and what happens in this show and addiction. And the fact,
interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean, they've drawn the connection to other things too, but absolutely, even the description of something that is irresistible from the outside, but inescapable from the inside, is in a sense a definition of addiction. And so why he was drawn to it, and why it becomes impenetrable, we don't know that. And I mean, I think that's kind of a different for every person, I guess.
Right. Well, that's a really good question to even just pose to yourself. Is like, why would I choose a place that I know would limit me? Why would I choose that? And so I think that, the fact that we don't know exactly why he did it puts the onus on ourselves to say, well, why would I do it? Does that make sense?
I mean, I know that the two characters, when they first appeared in my life, came out of a question. And the question was, is my life going to be a life of security or a life of freedom? I mean, I'm just thinking about it, and that became A and B. So when I first started dealing with these characters, it was A and B, and then they became Alpha and Beta, so they had names, but then they became Althea and Boris.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that they are two sides of me. They happen to be played by a woman and a man. But one of the things about the play is that it is created such that it does not have to be a woman and a man. It could be two women. It could also be two men. They could switch. It doesn't really matter. It could be played by any age, any body type, any race, and anything, because it's an allegory. And I think that's, anybody could read your book and find exactly the same steps, the same 18 questions that you have. They're going to be relevant to everybody,
everyone, for sure.
And one of the things that I'm discovering about this play is, because it's an allegory, it's relevant to everybody in a different way. And one of the things that I love about it, and I'm curious if you have anything to say about this, is that it's also for multi-generational audiences. So unlike, a lot of things that get written are about a specific thing, a specific kind of person, a specific moment in time, a specific history, something like this. It's specifically humans. This is not about specifically humans. this is about a human experience, but it doesn't really even matter, if it's humans. And one of the reasons that it was important to me was that as a child, I had these questions. I didn't even know I had these questions, and I didn't know how to ask them or talk about them.
What's interesting that I hear is that you're I mean, like the first time you conceived of this, weren't you 18? Did I hear that
I
right?
think it was around 19.
18, 19, yeah. So to be at that place and then to go out and have your career and then to be circling back with the same questions, interestingly enough, because certainly I feel like looking at you, and you may have a different, we're all, we all look different to, to other people than to what's going on inside here.
Mm-hmm.
But you went out and you found the freedom, like you were going to do it, and you did. And so circling back to this now in just seeing the places, maybe, like I'm just thinking for myself, like I remember when, like I do think like I remember in high school, plays that I was in, just feeling like I could do anything at certain times, like it was just because I was so idealistic, I was like, well, why couldn't I do that, And then life comes in and you just see one thing after another. And part of it is you think, well, this should be easy, And again, that's just like the naivety is like, well, I should go on my very first audition and I should just get the part. And then everyone after that, I should just get the part, right? And there doesn't have to be, a huge amount of effort. And, but that's not life. That's really not life. And so, my question to you would be, why were you having these questions, and how does it relate to your, just to turn the question back on you, how does it relate to your journey now that you're doing this now? I mean, this is really, I know this has been an important piece for you to finally get out.
Yeah. And I just want to say that I'm having a conversation with Cindy Lou Barlow, the author of Playing You, about the Golden Cage and unlocking the stories inside of us. And we're live on several different streams, and you can actually chat to us and ask us questions if you have them. So Cindy, one of the things that happened to me is that I actually completed a version of this play very early on in my life. And I then discovered that the pathway from creating it and putting it on myself to actually getting it into the world was a pathway I didn't know anything about. And that was in it. And to be quite honest, it was really frustrating to me because it wasn't about me getting out there and doing it. And I really wanted to get out there and do it. I love telling stories with music. I loved being in it. And I discovered that the harp, to my surprise, I just started playing it in my early 20s because I actually needed a way to make a living. I had had a few lessons, and so it's actually in a TEDx talk that's about to come out. And so I ended up playing this harp. But what I did discover, and I always think it's really interesting because if you look at the harp right now, you will see what looks like a wing, just one wing, but you will also see something that looks like a prison, interestingly. And so the harp for me has been the experience of freedom. And so with the harp, I think I've lived, if you look at my career with the harp, which is, this like intrepid person that would do anything and that, invented a new harp and went out there and I'd do this and I did, okay, I just invent something, done that. That's my Boris side. That's that character that will just do anything. And yet this show, this story, I felt that it was in many ways more me than anything I was doing on stage. And it was stuck. So literally I was out there being Boris and I was also in here being Althea. So this story has never for one moment left me because I have been living both those stories all the time. And I have it that I'm not the only one. I have it that people are out there finding something. Maybe we find something that we're good at or that we fall into, whether it's being a parent, whether it's, something in a profession or, whatever, being a cook. I don't know what it is. And that maybe that is your passion. And certainly I have been passionate about the harp and more and more and more. as I get closer and closer to being able to express myself freely with it. And yet there's sometimes, or I don't know, maybe often, there's something that we haven't expressed. And
Yeah.
Shelley, the harpist Shelley Fairplay, is, yes, it looks like a wing, but perhaps also like the bars on a cage. Exactly. Who would have thought that I would end up playing an instrument with this story
Yeah.
always in my life, end up with something that actually embodies both.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there's a term called success ambivalence, where um, where we get right up to a point and then we just become ambivalent about it. And I know for myself, it's usually, there's some kind of fear, and it's like something that's like going to break off or break through, or whatever it is that I have. It's like such a sweet little baby that it's so precious to me that to put it out into the world and have other people judge it, or other people have opinions about it, just feels almost like too much. And so I think that, it's a little bit of what I hear you talking about, is that um, that this was a really important piece for you, and it's very deep. I can hear that, and so I can understand, and when you're talking about, well, I can, you know, be incredibly successful, have this amazing career as a harpist, as a singer, as a songwriter, as a storyteller. And then this one story, the one that got away, but it's awesome that you were able to find whatever, to bring you through it. And I think part of it is, because even in your story with Boris, so many times I try to do things by myself. I try and do things by myself, um, and there's reasons for that. I have stories about, well, I don't care, I'm going to do it by myself, or F you all, I'm going to, and so to really ask for help. Like there are times where I would choke, rather than ask someone for help, and so, but I just noticed, I there's a saying that one coach I had said, she says, connection is currency, but connection is also consistency. It's like the army that I need of people to help me in my life is is big. I need a lot of support, and I think that that's where we go it alone. And so, here you have Boris. She needed a Boris. She needed someone else, or some other part of herself to break out of that. And I think that's where we're all angels, for each other, in the sense of.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because there's two things in there. One is the theme of, you'll see in the show, of being pushed,
Yeah.
is because and that's a theme that was not there in the beginning of the show. So many of the most powerful themes in the show were not there in the beginning, and they took the lifetime to actually find. But there's a lot of, if anybody sees the show, there's a moment when one of the characters pushes the other off a cliff, and then you're just like, what? This is a fairy tale. What? And after the premiere, there was a lot of discussion about that, and there has been, people are just like, how could he do that? How could you let him do that? Does he and I always knew that he had to do that.
Yeah.
I knew it, but I didn't understand why until I had this friend who, I was having trouble moving on the Golden Cage, and I was pretty unhappy about that. And but I was at a harp festival, and this harpist came up to me, this guy, and he said, he knew my career, and he was like, are you really happy with your career? You should be really happy with your career, are you? And I was like, well, actually. And I told him the story of the Golden Cage and how I really wanted to tell this story. And he said, well, would you be happy if it was like running on Broadway and getting awards? And I said, well, I would be happy if I were working on it 30 minutes a day. And he said, okay, fine. You do that every day. You text me the 30 minutes that you did. So he became my accountability partner. And so every day I would take a picture of what I'd done and I would send it to him. And one day I got a really late start. And at 11:59, I get this text from him. If you do not do your 30 minutes today, you will burn in hell. And I was like, wow, this person has more commitment to my commitment than I have to my commitment. And I realized he pushed me. And that was the moment when that whole theme came into the play. And it answered the question, why does he push her off the cliff? Because she asks him to. She says, push me, take me to the edge and show me that I can fly. Let me take the leap of believing. But what I realized more recently is, why did that happen? Why did it have to be that? I don't know. I'm still answering. And this is what I want to kind of go back to what you were saying about having a village, or, having all this support.
Yeah.
I walked that question back a couple days ago, and I looked for, like, where did that really happen? Where did the thing happen that made that inevitable? And it was the moment, there's a middle of the play where everything stops. It's quiet, it's dark, all the accompaniment goes away, and the two characters are nearly touching, and they're singing basically, all my life I've waited for this moment, for the simple pleasure of belief. And then they basically say, I trust you. And I have it that in that one split second in which we experience trust, everything else is inevitable and also unimportant how it happens. And I have it that once that trust was established, she had to go off that cliff, because it was the only way for her to actually discover who she really was. And he had no more ability to stop himself than she had, ability to surrender to who she was. And I don't know this, but I'm curious if you've experienced that. I have it that trust is so powerful that it can actually unlock. Because I have it that was really the moment when the cage was unlocked, although they didn't really realize it until afterwards.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that there is trust. That story really actually reminds me of, when I was in school. I was a single mom. I was in acting school at Brandeis, and my dad was helping me every month. He was helping me. And then I graduated, and he wrote me a very nice letter, and he said, I will be helping you until October, and then that's the last. And I was like, because now I was going to have to fly alone. But that was the best push I could have gotten. Because it's very easy to be dependent, on people, and so the only way that I was going to be able to fly was to have that taken away. And then, that really put me on a whole different trajectory to, like, go out. But if I'd had that backing of that money, coming in every month, I could have just gone on and on and on the way I was. And, so it made me step up. It made me step up. So, what I'm hearing, you say in this story was that there was trust between them. And at that point, they wanted the best for each other. And when he looked at her,
maybe.
Well, I know that there was some jealousy and things like that, but I just mean in the sense of trusting, that he knew that was what was going to be good for her, just like my dad knew. I don't know how he knew. I mean, it just came out of the blue for me, but obviously he'd been thinking about it. I knew that he knew that would be the best for me, even though it would scare the crap out of me. But then, and the beauty of it was that I paid him back for, everything.
Wow.
That he loaned me. And that was adulting, for myself, of, like, being like, making him proud that way.
I mean, that's really interesting. And it's interesting to talk about in the midst of about fundraising. I'm really fundraising. Because what it takes me back to actually ask this question of the difference between dependency and support. Because just a minute ago, you were talking about having this huge, really army of support. I don't know about army is the right word, but all this support. And I'm just curious, what's the difference between the dependency that you felt with your father and the support that you feel now?
I think one makes you stronger, the other makes you weaker, you know?
So does it have to do with, like, for example, there was a time in my life when I had a patron who was really supporting the work that I was doing. And that made it possible for me to do work that I never, ever,
Exactly.
ever would have been able to do. That made it possible for me to get a Grammy nomination. And that Grammy nomination also ended up giving a Grammy nomination to every single person in that project. And
Exactly.
so it had that really, the money that he gave me made that all possible. And I've had a lot of people funding this project, which is amazing. And everybody who has donated, it's what you've created is incredible. And we're also completing the final post-production
Which is
cost
going to be
in the
great. It's
fundraiser,
going to be
right?
so beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's out there. It's out there. We're going back and getting that,
And getting it. Yeah.
getting the funding. But 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 I know that what was I going to say? Oh, that support. In fact, that's what the new TEDx talk is about. Is when I reached out and asked for support, and when someone reached out to me with support, and I took that support, that was what unlocked this cage, because it was somebody donating right in the beginning, saying, look, take this money, finish that show, get it out in the world.
It's amazing. Yeah.
That's what made it happen. Now, that is support and not dependency. And yet it's still, and so
Well, when you're talking about the arts, I think you're talking about something slightly different than, when I'm talking about like my dad not supporting me anymore, because it was a part of my life where I needed to go out and I needed to be an adult. Like, for instance, because being a single parent.
Somehow it was disempowering you.
Yeah.
Rather than
Well,
empowering
being
you.
a single parent, I could just, it was like being in the cage. It's like, can I make it on my own? Like, I'm getting help from, the government for my housing, and my dad's helping me. And this whole idea of like, and so there was a mentality around that was actually crippling to some degree, because
Wow.
I didn't think I could do it. What you're talking about, as far as what I can tell, is that you have a creation here and you're just getting funding for it, because everything needs funding. And so that's what you do in this world. You have a product, and the thing that you did with that product is, people gave you funding, and then you didn't sit on your butt and just like take in the money like, well, thank you very much.
See.
You went
So
and you did it. So
I see.
It was the money that gave you, just like when my dad helped me, it was the money he gave me to get an education, to take me to the next level. And that's what people are doing, is taking you to the next level. But it's not welfare. You have a product.
I see. So I think this is really powerful, and it's so bizarre because it kind of seems like it has nothing to do with this, but I think it does, because what I'm seeing here is that anything can either keep us on the same level, in the same place, or actually elevate. So the same exact thing, for example, someone funding an artistic project or funding another person can be something that keeps them disempowered or keeps them from moving forward, or it can be something that actually elevates it.
Yes.
What is the difference? What is at the heart of that? I know this is not the time. We don't have to have this conversation. It's just really
but I think one of the things, at least what I see in myself and in you, I think what it is soul's purpose. It's that really deeply wants to create, even though you're afraid to get out of the cage, that thing that just keeps saying, I gotta keep trying, I gotta keep trying, I gotta keep trying. I know for me in my book, it took me so long, even writing it. I used to go up to people's books that were really bad. I mean, like, just something that they just threw together, now you can write with AI, right? And I would just be like, oh, someone wrote this book. It's a miracle, just that a book got published, and now, I have my own book, and it was such a miracle. But, so I was so afraid to like break out and actually do it. And some of it was hard work, but some of it was just inner work. And so I think what it really is this indomitable soul that says, this I need to do because I'm the only one that can do it. I'm the only one that's me that can do it. Like you're the only one that could have written The Golden Cage. I mean, the music, the lines, the story, the whole thing, has your name on it in every possible way because you're such an original, But that's what I think it is. I think it is that we come into this life, with our own kind of contractor. I call it the curriculum, and we know what it is. We might not completely consciously know, but we know. And then at some point we come up against, can I push through it? And that's, that in acting, there's always going to be an obstacle, and the obstacle is either going to come from within or without. And time is always an obstacle in everything. It's always an obstacle, and it's used all the time in theater and movies. Time is always going to be the obstacle because you only have so many hundreds of thousands of minutes and hours to live, and so what are you going to do with this amount of time? So so I think what it is it's just, to look at it in nature. It's just, what makes that little seed sprout through the rocks and everything to just start to like blossom. And I know that's analogy you like because I know you have nature analogies in yours, but but I think what it is that seed in us that we are here for a reason, and that reason is whatever it is that's just like pushing us to do it. And Henry David Thoreau said, so many people die with the song still in them,
Right.
And it's like, I don't want to be that person. And that's why, yeah.
I love that. And I know we're coming to the end, and I really love how it comes to, soul's purpose, and that what we want to support in each other and what we want to push for in ourselves and what we want others to push us to achieve is that soul's purpose.
Exactly.
And I see that your book is giving people recipes and questions to support that soul's purpose. And I see that this show and the questions and that it allows the audience to look for their soul's purpose, but it also is there for actors as a vehicle for full self-expression and also for theater companies. So I just love that there's so many different levels on which the things that we create can push or support each other's soul purpose.
Yeah. I mean, it's been really fun to unpack it with you because, sometimes you'll go to a musical, especially, and it's like, wow, that was really nice. And, but your play, you have to chew on it. When you say people had all these questions and I didn't even know the answer to the questions, and it's like, it's beautiful to have something that is that way, that actually asks the audience to, you're a participant as you're watching it. You're a participant with like this music, a participant with these choices, and what do I mean by participant is like, you're meeting this isn't going to all just like come to you and you're just going to sit back and all you have to do is just like, no, you're going to have to like work and be there and figure stuff out. And, I'm still thinking like, why was she able to fly? Why?
Oh, I can tell you right now why she was able to fly.
Spoiler alert.
No,
it's not in the play.
No, I'm happy to spoil alert, because one of the things that I find really powerful about this play is I know what happened. I know the plot. I've seen it over and over and over again. And yet each time I see it, it unlocks more. Yes. And this is what many people have said when they see
layered.
it.
Yeah, very layered.
And so I can tell you that this was one of the questions that I was having trouble answering. And what happens is when she is shoved off the cliff, she has no wings. She cannot fly. She goes off the cliff with this lie in her head that, oh, sure, you can fly. It's going to happen. And halfway down, she realizes that's a lie and that she was a fool. And as she sees the ground coming towards her, she finally just completely surrenders. And she's like, this is one of my favorite lines in the show. And it never came until very late, because I was asking this question too. She says, and so I opened up my arms to embrace the end of everything. I hung above the earth. She turns to Boris and says, I hung above the earth. Instead of ground, I felt the air, the lift of wind. The wind was everywhere, and I was lifted to the sky. I could fly. And then when she gets high enough, she says, and so I turned, and when I turned, I saw the mountain. It rose impossibly high up in the clouds, and on the highest peak, in the glint of gold in sunlight, and I saw. All at once, I saw my life as I had been when I was small, when I had heard the story of the greatest gift of all, the greatest prize of all. And I had vowed before I died that I would find my way inside, that I would be the one to prove the myth was true, that I would find the golden cage. I always dreamt about it as a child. And at that point, Boris says, then you are a bird person. And she says, yes, I was born as a bird person like you. I heard my father sing tales of this cage. I came to find this cage. I locked myself inside. I lost my wings like you. But I always had these wings to fly. I just forgot about them. So she can fly because she always could.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she had closed all of that down, just like he did.
So what I'm hearing is that she went back to her true nature.
Yeah, she discovered.
And by surrendering.
Right, exactly, by surrendering. And you said something quite earlier before in this conversation, something about, when you're young, you're like, hey, I'm just going to go do that. And sometimes you can. And sometimes we can get back to that. And then as we get older, and I don't know that it has anything to do with age, but just experience, there's these layers of expectation. Oh no, actually that happened that time. Oh no, wait, no, there's a better, no. And until we're walking around in these carapaces that become that golden cage, nobody can see it from outside, but we truly are locked on the inside.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah.
And that's how she can fly. And that's how you can fly too. Just don't jump off a cliff. So Cindy, thank you so much. And thank you for writing a book that people can read so they don't have to jump off of a cliff in order to actually find their own freedom and learn how to play you, because that's what Althea finally is able to do. And so is Boris, is able to actually reconnect with who they are and truly play.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. And if anybody's interested in the book, you can just go to my website, which is cindyloubarlow.com. So
right. And I actually put that link in the post if you're seeing a post to this.
Okay. I'm not.
I know you're not seeing the post because you got in the back door. So thank you so much for this conversation. I'll be having more conversations over the next months and years about unlocking the golden cage. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Can't wait to see it again. I saw the very kind of first version of it.
So right. You literally saw me sit at a piano with you sitting there, and I played the story to you.
Day. That was such an amazing day. Yeah, all of you should be very jealous. I got to see it first, but then I got to see the video of it.
And the development of it, which is really fun. Yeah. And if you're watching this on the live or early on, go to goldencagemusic.com, donate to this project, and you get to be part of supporting and being part of that wind, that wings that helps this show fly into the world. So thank you so much, Cindy. And thank you everybody who listened and for everybody who commented. And I look forward to seeing you very soon again.